Hello, friends. Today, we're going to be thinking about all the ways that wetlands help us. We're going to be diving into this text here, and this is only one page from one of our wonderful books from online from our Get Epic. This is from the book Restoring Wetlands. So, we're going to read the first page of chapter 2 today. When we read the first page of chapter 2, you're going to be looking for evidence in the text. That means things in the text that help us prove our opinion. Our questions for today are: how do wetlands help us? And what do you think is the most important way they help? So we're going to think about all the ways that wetlands help us just based on this one page of the text. So I'm going to read that out loud the first time all the way through super smoothly and fluently. And I want you to listen and think about how we can answer those questions. How do wetlands help us? Then I'm going to go back with one of my colors up here. I'm going to go with a bright yellow and highlight the areas or underline the areas that give me my evidence of why I think the wetlands help us. Your idea could be different than mine. So I'm going to underline all of the different ways and you can choose one. Let's start by reading them. The importance of wetlands. Wetlands are important to the earth in many ways. They produce a great variety of grasses, trees, and flowers. Many of these plants provide food and shelter for the birds, amphibians, reptiles, and insects that live in the wetland year-round, as well as the migratory birds who use the wetlands for their breeding and resting grounds. Many species of fish rely on estuaries, salt marshes, and coastal areas for their spawning grounds. Whoa, you're probably thinking, Miss Nicolau, that doesn't make any sense to me. First of all, what are some of those things? How are those things important to me? Well, let's go back and define a few things. Then we'll read it again and find those important facts. Amphibians, reptiles, and insects. Amphibians and reptiles are another type of animal. Amphibians are like frogs, where they can breathe some air, but they spend most of their time in the water. Reptiles are cold-blooded creatures, like turtles here, or salamanders and lizards. So amphibians and reptiles can go in and out of water, just like some insects can. So they're a type of animal. Wetland is just like the name sounds. It's a land that is wet. It's kind of marshy. It's very wet and moist. It has a lot of moss and water. Species just means what type of animal. More specifically, I'm not quite sure what estuaries is. You even heard me trying to figure out what that word is. So I'm going to look it up real quick. I'm going to even go to the Get Epic and see if it shows up.
Estuary.
Estuary. I even said it wrong. Let's see what estuary means.
Estuary.
It says a passage where the tide meets a river current. An arm of the sea at the lower end of a river. Oh, that makes more sense. It's where the river and the ocean might meet. Oh, that's okay. So now I know an estuary is where the river and the ocean meet. So fish rely on that estuary, salt marshes, which is where there's a lot of salt in the water, and coastal areas like beaches for their spawning grounds, where they have their eggs and babies made. So that makes me think a wetland and an estuary might be around the same thing. It's a very wet area where a bunch of fish can be. So let's go back and read now that we've figured out some of these words with our first read and figure out what was the important thing. Let's go back to our question. How do wetlands help us? And what do you think was the most important way they help? So let's read it again, and maybe I can replace some words to make it make more sense. Wetlands are important to the earth in many ways. They produce a great variety of grasses, trees, and flowers. Many of these plants provide food and shelter for the birds and animals like amphibians and reptiles and insects, bugs, that live in the wetland year-round, as well as migratory birds, we know those, who use the wetlands for their breeding and resting grounds. Many species of fish rely on these wetland areas like estuaries, salt marshes, and coastal areas for their spawning grounds. So to sum it up, summing means I'm going to put this in my own words. It says wetlands are important to the earth because they provide a variety of plants and food and shelter for animals and bugs all year round, and provide a good space for fish and migratory birds to rest and have their kids. So what do you think made the wetlands so important? Well, I'm going to go back and highlight those spots. It said right here, they produce a great variety of grasses, trees, and flowers. That told us about those plants. It says many of those plants provide food and shelter for birds, amphibians, reptiles, and insects that live in the wetland year-round. I could do this part here too, but that's a little just extra. This is the more important piece. It also says down here that many species of fish rely on estuary salt marshes and coastal areas for their spawning grounds. So I see up here, it kind of says that already. So I don't need to do this extra bit here. It's kind of stated already. So I think we found our two big facts that help us answer our question. That they help produce grasses, trees, and flowers. So they have a bunch of different plants, and they provide food and shelter for many different types of animals and bugs. Did you agree? How do you think the wetlands help us? Hmm, I like the way you think. You were thinking a lot about how these animals affect us and how this area might affect us. I think that's pretty important too. Do you think that this helps us as a person of the earth? Hmm, you might want to write those ideas down. When you're doing your text today, there's one about birds that you'll be writing answers to questions like this down too. So be looking for those text features to help you figure out maybe this is where the importance of the text is, and also be reading through to find out the important parts. Not every word is important. You need to find out your reasons. Notice that I didn't highlight this first sentence. Wetlands are important to the earth in many ways. That didn't answer our questions. Our question was, how do they help? Just saying they're important doesn't tell us how they helped. Another question was, why do you think they're important? Saying the word important, well, they're important, doesn't answer why they're important. You have to explain. So that's why we pick some sentences from in our text a little further that gave us good information. So good luck on your text later on, and I hope that this helped you solve a few mysteries. And if you feel interested, you can go into our Get Epic and read more about restoring the wetlands. There's a whole big book about them. So good luck. We're proud of you. Keep up the good work.